everybody, and welcome to Pickaway County Virtual Ag Days. I'm Katarina Sharp from the Pickaway Soil and Water Conservation District, and today we are at HONEYRUN Farm with Isaac and Jayne Barnes and their employee Leif, learning a little bit about honeybees.
My name is Jayne Barnes, and with my husband Isaac, we own HONEYRUN Farm. We started keeping bees because my husband Isaac ate a lot of honey, and he always enjoyed science and projects, and so I thought it would make a really great gift for him. So I actually gave him a beehive as a Christmas gift one year. And that's how it all started. Just from a simple hobby, we grew it into a business.
My name is Isaac Barnes. I'm the co-owner of HONEYRUN Farm. We started in with bees about 2003. 2011, we got into some grocery stores with the honey. And by 2012, I had quit teaching. I was a school teacher, and we were into this full-time as a business. Right now, a number of beehives at HONEYRUN, we have 750. We increase in the spring, but roughly in the mid 700s is where we're sitting right now. There are like 30,000 different species of bees, but as far as in the Apis melliflora, which is the honeybees, there are different strains. The one we use the most of is called Italians. That's the real honey producing strain, so Italians, and then we have a lot of Carnioans. Both of these originated from Europe, obviously. There are buckfast bees, which was an interesting type of bee bred by a monk in Europe. Buckfast, Russians, which come from the Russian area, and they survive winter a little bit better. These strains have different traits that if you have a northern area and you want these bees to survive the winter, maybe Russians are the way to go because they eat less food. If you're in the south or you're hauling bees out to pollinate almonds, you might want Italians because they build up fast, huge clusters, and that's what you need for honey production and for pollination. So we have a real mix of Italians and Carnioans. One queen bee per hive. She can live 5 years or so, but a young queen is better, and if you're into producing honey and making strong hives for pollination, it's good to have queens that are 2 years older or less. A younger queen is better. A queen's purpose in life is to populate that hive, and a better queen is one that lays more eggs. That means she was bred during good weather and can just go on and on for years, a really well-bred queen. And there's a real science behind queen breeding. Most of those bees, most of the larvae become worker bees, which are females that are not fertile. They don't become a queen and lay eggs. They are there to run the hive, basically. Collect the honey, collect nectar, do pollination, collect protein with the pollen. All the jobs that require the maintenance of a hive, that's left to the females in there, which are the worker bees. What kind of predators? Number one, first and foremost, there's a mite. It's called the varroa mite, and that's been a problem in the United States for about 30 years, longer in Europe. But that is the worst parasite that beekeepers have had to deal with in the last couple centuries, really. There are other things. There's bacterial diseases. Different viral infections, but if you can keep the mite under control, which is your number one enemy, the other things kind of solve themselves. That's the number one predator, and then also honeybees deal with a real lack of diversity in their diet just because farming is so clean now. We don't have weeds like we used to, and so bees are lacking nutrition. And so you have to supplement that to have healthy hives. Where do bees forage? Here in Ohio, we have 3 real, we call them honey flows. In the spring, all the trees are blooming, And as far as the nectar, the honeysuckle and the black locust, plenty of tree lines with those species, and we can make a lot of spring honey when those two bloom, especially the honeysuckle this year we saw. Then in the summer, right here in central Ohio, it's just like heaven for bees. We have soybeans. Soybeans are everywhere. Now, if you move a little north, they get more clovers, white and yellow clover, and the basswood. If you move south during that time, they have the brambles and the woodses and the tulip poplar trees. So it all depends on where you put your bees. We have 42 locations now, and we try to put them in places where they have plenty to work on, like stream valleys and set aside acreage. It's just, it's kind of a trick with the monocrop farming that we have. Except for during that soybean bloom, there's not a lot out there for them. So we really do rely on the spring bloom and the fall. The goldenrods and the asters come on pretty strong in October, and we rely on those to really get the bees fit for the winter. And you hope you're located with your yard locations not too far from a big plot of goldenrod or something like that.
During the winter, the bees really just stay in their hive and try to stay warm, and they eat their honey. So it's very important that we leave enough honey for them to survive. And they'll just huddle up into a ball and they will eat honey. If the days get warmer in the winter, they'll come out and actually use the bathroom and clean out their hive, remove any dead bees, anything that's, that might contaminate the hive. They'll actually clean it out. They're very hygienic. And then they'll just, stay in when it's cold out and keep the queen warm and keep each other warm and just eat their honey over the winter.
Hive life for a bee. So they start out as an egg and then a larva, and that process takes 21 days, so about 3 weeks. The queen is constantly laying eggs, and her rate of egg laying varies with the time of year. In the spring, she's just going gangbusters, and she'll lay 1,500 eggs a day because the hive is increasing, right? And so by June, you have 60,000 bees in that hive, and that's a honey-producing hive. So it's just a constant cycle. The brood is hatching out, takes 3 weeks, and then she starts off as a nurse bee, she stays in there, right? For 2 weeks. This bee does lots of cleaning, lots of, they are building wax during that time. Their wax glands are functioning. Young, vital bees that you hope were raised right with plenty of feed. And then at about 2 weeks, they'll start making orientation flights. And I'm talking the worker bees, right? The queen is just laying this whole time, but the worker bees will start making orientation flights over 3 or 4 days where they get to know the area. They fly. You can see an orientation flight looks different. She'll do little circles and come back and do little circles and go in, and they'll do those flights for a little while, and then they become a forager. And they're older. For the last half to third of their life, they are foraging. Sometimes the year, that's an awesome job because in the spring, all the trees are throwing pollen, and they're bringing in a lot of nectar too. They're producing honey. That's why you want a lot of bees during the peak of the bloom. A forager in August in this area say they have nothing to do. They're kind of hanging out. They might go get some pollen off the corn, which is not that good for them. They're just hanging out, more or less. So the job varies with the age of the bee and the conditions and the season. So yeah, and the bee will live. So 2 weeks in the hive, 2 weeks out of the 3-4 weeks out of the hive. Bees in the summertime, she'll do about 500 miles worth, and that takes 6 or 7 weeks. Do other stinging insects bother the hives? No. And I would have some pushback on that because A lot of people say, well, the yellow jackets are robbing out my hive. This time of year especially. Yellow jackets are tough, and they want that calorie supply. They're sitting on the beehives in the form of honey, and they will test these hives out and try to go in. But if you have a hive that's strong and ready to go into winter, they will laugh at that yellow jacket. They're not going to let that thing in. What you're seeing often with a yellow jacket invasion is a hive that's on its way down that had already had problems before, probably due to mites, and it just can't handle the yellow jacket attack, basically. So the answer is no, other stinging insects don't bother honeybees.
We'd like to give a huge shout out to Isaac and Jayne Barnes for giving us a tour of their farm, and thank you to all of you for joining us today.